Thank you very much. I say how happy I am to be here among pioneers of agriculture heritage in this very, very important place of Ishikawa Prefecture. I want to thank Professor Nakamura, the university, Ishikawa University, and colleagues and friends for giving me this opportunity to be with you and discuss about the conceptual framework and issues related to globally important agricultural heritage system. I would do a presentation which is similar to one I made 3 days ago in Kyoto Hall of Fame for a very, very high-level group of people, about 1,000 people who were in this Kyoto Hall of Fame, celebrating actually the day of celebration of Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol is a protocol on climate change. The title of my presentation will be Cultivating Diversity in Our Agricultural Heritage Systems. And I was talking as the founder and president of World Agricultural Heritage Foundation, and that was why I was invited there. So I will go through some of the work that I have presented there. I published a book last year on the state of the world, land and water resources for food and agriculture in FAO, for which we evaluated our performance, the world performance in agriculture sector for the last 50 years. And in this book, which was presented to FAO governing body, we said what happened in the last 50 years. We had, at the world level, an expansion of agricultural land to the forest, to the wetland, to the mountain of 12%. We had an expansion of irrigation areas by 117%, and we increased the food by 200%, means threefold food production. Well, it seems that we are very excited and we are very successful, but we at the same time degraded our land, make a lot of problem of desertification, climate change, poverty, and migration. So what we achieved in agricultural sector, that producing a lot of food, ended up to destroy our natural resource base and created so many problems. These are some pictures that I personally take. You see the first one, erosion in my own country, Persia. Salinization, a lot of land, agricultural land. Degradation of pasture, where the animals practically have no pasture to eat. Sand dune encroachment in the farmlands. The sand going to the farmlands.
砂が風で飛んできてそれを遮るものがないので、農地をダメにしてしまったりとか。
The flood in the cities.
町にまで洪水が押し寄せてきたりとか。
Because of climate change.
そしてそれはもう絶対気候変動のせいなんですけども。
And migration because of poverty.
というような写真が示しています。
So we created a number of what we call in this book systems at risk. Agricultural systems at risk. And these are the different type of system associated with our agriculture. For example, if you take the Europe, this very small part, we have, of course, the problem of pollution of water. We have the problem of biodiversity loss. We have the problem of climate impact, etc., etc. So different type of risks associated with different places, which actually creates a lot of uncertainty about our future of food security and development. One example, for example, is the depletion of groundwater in many dryland countries like India, China, Middle East, Latin America. And because of the groundwater is the source of the irrigation in many countries, with the depletion and pollution of groundwater, we are facing very, very difficult situation of food security because the water is simply not there anymore because they have pumped too much water for irrigation. And of course, we endangered the traditional system, the traditional agriculture system, like this one in China, which is an example of globally important agricultural heritage and ingenuity of human beings, such as beautiful terraces producing rice together with fish, which help these people to have food security in these areas. They are now abandoned or destroyed, or because we do not have enough support policy, they are the systems which are actually disappearing. And now we are going towards 2050. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us. Already we destroyed our natural resource base, and we have huge challenges to face in the future. One of the biggest challenge in developing countries is the population growth, particularly in poorer countries. As you see, in least developed countries, the population growth is so many times sixfold than population growth in developed countries. Another problem is the change in our consumption pattern. More and more people eat meat, more than vegetable, more than grains, more than fruit. Traditional society consumed much more vegetable than modern societies. And the production of 1 kilo meat needs 10 times more water than 1 kilo of grain or fruit or vegetable. So this is a huge problem, particularly in some countries where the dry lands, the water is already scarce, and we have problem with water, like India, like China, like Brazil, like many, many countries around the world. All the dryland areas countries, the water is already finished, very little water available, even drinking water is very scarce. So by changing our diet, we will eat more food, more meat, and more meat means more water. That's a big problem that we have, and we have already with water. And with these trends, both in population growth, urbanization, and change of consumption pattern, we need to produce 60% more food globally and 100% more food in developing countries. This is a big challenge with the resource limitation already we have and degradation of resources. Of course, then we need a shift, a change of our development paradigm, particularly agricultural development paradigm. Because in 50 years, in spite of all successes, we lost so much and degraded so much of our resources that if we continue like that, we will have a lot of problems. So we need to change the way we are doing agriculture. Because we are talking about the poorest of the poor in developing countries, that they don't have enough food, they don't have enough water, they don't have enough health sanitation. And in spite of all the success that we had in the last 50 years for food production, we have still more than 1 billion people hungry. So what we should ask as a question for this paradigm shift that I spoke, that to what extent farmers can improve food production with low cost, locally available technologies and input under a changing climate scenario, and what impact this kind of food producing system could have on environmental good and services. Because globalization has not the resolve of poverty, problem of poverty, problem of food insecurity, and a problem of natural resource degradation. So we need to go back to local. That is the message. Now, this is a picture comparing different pattern of food production. Two developed countries up there, Australia and United States. One emerging country, India, and one poor country. When you compare the amount of money they pay for 1 week of food basket, it is enormous difference between the developed countries, which is around $350 per week, means $50 more or less per day of food purchase, compare to a country like Chad, which is $1.35. So there are 340 times food is more expensive in spite of all the abundance for a family in the developed countries than in developing countries. So these people, these poor people in developing countries would never be able to really catch up with the income they have to eat that kind of food. In addition, when you look at these two pictures, the up part look very, very diverse, but in fact, the diversity is not about diversity of food, it's diversity of packaging. Putting in the boxes, labels, colors of boxes. In addition, because of the loss in diversity of our food, we have double problems. In developing country, because the food diversity have been lost, people are poor in nutrition and microelement, and in developed countries, because of that poor diet and loss of food diversity, we have the kind of problems like diseases of affluence, they call it, like type 2 diabetes, like heart disease, like obesity. So both in the developed countries and developing countries, we have problem with the way we have produced food because we diminished our diversity of food. As you see, 90% of the food diet in developed countries, of course, fortunately, this is not case of Japan, because Japan have kept their tradition, their food diversity, but in developed countries like in United States, Australia, Europe, and other developed countries, but also in the big cities of developing countries, even in younger generation in a country like Japan and China, the food diversity is getting less and less, and of course we have more and more problem with the health because the diversity of food and nutrition is no longer there, and we eat more fat, we eat more sugar, and that creates, of course, the health problem. So all this diversity, which is the diversity of food connected to biodiversity, this is the food diversity, this is biodiversity, for example, of potato. The number of different potatoes in Peru and the Andes region in Latin America, there are 230 varieties of potato, each of them a different color and different taste, or there are so many seeds and grains in dry lands that they have been all lost because we don't eat them anymore. Again, China, India, Japan are lucky countries because they kept their food tradition, and you have, fortunately, still a lot of very, very diverse food. But this is not the case. And then, of course, the loss of what they call it functional biodiversity, which is the loss of pollination capacity by bees because there has been too much of pesticides in farming, and of course the bees, the insects are lost and they cannot pollinate, crops, and that is a big problem in many countries. So we reached to the conclusion that both a major challenge and opportunities are small farmers and family farming. Because small farmers and family farming, they are producing locally, they maintain their natural environment better, they make the food available without really cost of transportation and emissions. And of course, even today, they produce more than 70% of the food of the world. Why don't we invest in these small farmers? Because if we invest in these small farmers, in local communities, whatever they produce, it is diverse. In addition to that, it is ecologically better and viable. And that way, we could have not only resolved the problem of food production, but also environmental stewardship. And of course, culture and biodiversity and environmental conservation, they are so much together. The culture is the root of our civilization. Like, for example, here, these are the examples of the cultural root of rice production. In China, in Himalaya, in India, in Indonesia, in Japan, in Vietnam, and Hindu temple, these are different goddess and symbols of rice. So the food and culture are so much intimately linked. So if you want to maintain culture, you need to maintain the food diversity. If you want to maintain food diversity, you need to maintain the cultural diversity. So it is very important link. So because of these sort of general problems and general issues around the world, we come to our very close subject area, which is the dynamic conservation of globally important agricultural heritage. This program is to respond to all these problems that we mentioned before, and it is a global partnership. GIAHS is a global partnership which we launched in 2002 during the World Summit in Sustainable Development in Johannesburg. So this is a response to the demand for sustainable development. This photo is a photo of a village in Peru, highland of Peru, and these are the people with these traditional clothes. Every day they go and plant potatoes, and the potato is the major crop in this area. For GIAHS selection, we have 5 major criteria. One is local food and livelihood security. Second is biodiversity and genetic resources. Third is local knowledge of individuals and communities. Fourth is cultural diversity of agriculture, including the diversity of products and services. And the last is landscape diversity, aesthetic beauty. So these are the 5 criteria we have selected to choose globally important agricultural heritage systems. So once we choose a globally important agricultural heritage, they should have at least 50 to 60 to 70% of these criteria to be actually fulfilled. For example, there is an area which is very strong in biodiversity. In another area, we are very strong in cultural diversity. In another area is the beauty. But most of the time, interestingly, these are all going together. It's all a sort of together make the globally important agricultural heritage systems. So when Noto and Sado Island presented these 2 places for GIAHS selection, they looked at all these criteria, they analyzed them, they assessed them, they described them, sent it to FAO. We came and visited. We saw that there are important biodiversity. We saw there are local food. We saw that there is cultural diversity, the place is beautiful, there is a sense of community, and people know about how to manage land, how to manage water, how to manage landscape, and also, as I said, the diversity of culture. All these together formed a package put together, presented as say, globally important agricultural heritage. And based on that, of course, not only FAO and the Secretariat, but we have a scientific committee which review these criteria, and then it presents it to a big steering committee, and then FAO selects and nominate them as globally important agricultural heritage. And of course, we will follow and monitor these criteria to at least stay. If they are not improved or if they are degraded, obviously they lose. These systems will lose their nomination. So if there is, when monitoring is happening every 2-3 years, we come and look at, again, make an assessment. If it is not improved, if the situation is not improved or degraded, then just like a UNESCO World Heritage System, if they do not maintain those heritage sites sort of properly, obviously they lose the nomination. So it is the same for agricultural heritage. So they should always improve. That is why the community and the policy activities should be always joining forces in order to maintain this system for better future. So now I'm going to show you some examples of these globally important agricultural heritage around the world. And it's essentially pictures. I'm not going to go too much in details. But for example, starting with the rice fish system, it's a pity in Japan you have so many rice paddies. You eat both rice and fish. But because of the intensification and too much use of pesticides, your rice paddies cannot anymore hold fish. And of course, rice fish system is a very ingenious system because the rice is fertilized by the fish. Fish eats the insect, so maintain a harmony between rice and fish system, not only, but also we have both protein and energy and the grain together in the places which is the poor places of the world. I visited some places in Noto where they are not using any more pesticide. They are producing organic rice. So little by little, the rice paddies are full of frogs, animals, different type of worm, different type of mollusks. That is very important because not only you restore the ecology and the biodiversity, but also a type of sort of equilibrium is built between nature and of course then you don't need any more pesticide or fertilizer. So if we have more and more of these kind of systems, natural systems, hopefully more fish in your rice paddies, then it means that you are improving in your GIAHS. This is Ifugao rice terraces. It is a wonderful place. Also, many varieties of rice have been grown in this very wonderful place. It is in danger because the forest is degraded. The water is not enough for all the paddies, for all the irrigation system. And we are trying to actually to improve the situation, bring back the livelihood in that place, including doing some ecotourism, because many people are very happy to see these beautiful rice terraces, and also the rituals. They prepare a lot of good, interesting products like sake that you have also in the Philippines, in the Ifugao. So this is how we are working, for example, with Philippine government and local communities. This is another system in the highland of Peru. These are the kind of land that ancient farmers, they prepare a band of water, a band of land, because it's in 4,000 meters of high altitude. During the night, there is frost. So during the day, the water absorbs the heat. during the night, it releases the heat to be able to plant in 4,000 meter altitude potato, which is the basis for food security of those people. So this is an ingenious system that mitigate the climate variability and the problem of climate. This is another example of GIAHS in Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, alpaca system. You have probably heard of it. It's a very, very interesting animal, which is both for transport, but also particularly for alpaca wool. They were disappearing because people were abandoning them. Now it's another GIAHS that we have been working on. This is another one in Masai, in Tanzania and Kenya. It's pastoral system. So we have Chile Island. Is it another one? I don't want to go to details of these, but you just sort of name them, and we will continue because it's getting too long. This is oasis system in the middle of desert. There is a very, very ingenious underground irrigation system to produce dates, multi-layer gardens, and a fascinating civilization with very little water. This is another example of GIAHS in North Africa, like in Tunisia, in Algeria, in Morocco, in Egypt, that we have been looking into. You see, around this oasis, there is nothing grow because there is no water. But human ingenuity managed to have these beautiful gardens because of the water, which comes from 500 kilometers far from the mountain all the way down. Here is Kashmir with saffron. Here, of course, is Satoyama in Japan. You know it very well. We have, as I said, identified 200 systems which are unique in the world so far. There is certainly more. But out of these 200 systems, so far we have recognized 19 systems which we continue to work. Essentially, once we identify, we have 3 levels of intervention. The global level is the recognition of the system. At national level is the policies, development policies for dynamic conservation. And at local level is empowering people and diversification, labeling, eco-labeling, ecotourism, in order to allow those systems to be developed and maintained. So global, national, local, connecting these activities together. The recognition is at global level is by FAO. The national policies support these small farmers and family farmers and local Satoyamas and Satoumis. And then, of course, at local level, branding the products and services in order to get economic added value. And we work on a framework which is called Sustainable Livelihood Framework, which look at 5 capitals of rural areas. We have natural capital, human capital, social capital, physical capital, and financial capital. These are all the capitals that we need to invest on. It's not only, for example, financial capital, money. It's not only natural capital, land, water. It is also human capital, meaning young people, health, and individual school, knowledge, skills, social capital, the relation and connection between them, and physical capital, of course, infrastructure like road, market, etc. So all of these together, we work with the farmers to prepare an action plan where we invest in all these capitals. We need to do intensification, but without simplification, because often intensification, like in Japanese rice paddies, means we put more seeds, more fertilizer, more pesticide to produce more. But it is simplified system, and we use a lot of energy, and we destroy the natural capital. We want to intensify. We want to bring a lot of goods and products and services, but without simplifying the system. Like, for example, comparison between Satoyama system and intensified rice. They are, of course, both very productive, but one is diversity of products, beauty of the products, and also richness of products, along with culture. And the other one is the kilo, only kilo. So that's not really, for us, the objective. As I said before, we want to link global to local, local to global. That's exactly what we have done. Like here, the Prime Minister of India is delivering a GIAHS certificate to a farmer in Koraput of India. This farmer is indigenous person who, in his farm, there are more than 400 varieties of rice, different type of rice. He has a very small plot, but the richness of 400 varieties of his plot is recognized as globally important contribution to the world. And these are different type of activities we have around the world, like ecological farming, like labeling, like fairs, potato fairs, for example, like Oasis State fairs, the markets, products of farmers to be directly exposed. And these are the kind of activities we promote, say, globally important agricultural heritage. GIAHS, it's not about the past, it's about the future. We are not talking about conserving in museum a small piece of farm. It is about how we want to develop a kind of agriculture which is prosperous. This is a farm in United States, in Napa Valley. This is a wine, organic wine production, where the farmer have reconstituted all the ecological services, like all these plants that you have around the vineyards, are the plants which attract insects, attracts bees, in order to be able to produce a very excellent aromatic wine with organic farming. So it's about future, it's not about the past. And this wine is not big quantity, but it is very expensive in market. And the farmer gets its reward. Not only it produces good things, but also it maintains the ecology and the biodiversity. So you can call this a American modern Satoyama. As Kofi Annan says in one of his speeches, that biodiversity is the life insurance policy for life itself. So we need to maintain a very biodiverse agriculture. Diversity and biodiversity is so important for our life support system, and it is like an insurance. More biodiversity we have, more insured we are against the problems of future. Yes, for example, these different colors are different varieties of quinoa with different local varieties. It is such a beautiful place in Peru. It's more interestingly, each of them are resistant to some kind of pest, some kind of disease. So at the whole, you have a very resistant and biodiverse farm. This is important for present and future generations. These are examples of GIAHS around the world on the map. As I said, we have 19 systems, but we have many others to explore. Now, I finished my, I'm sorry it took longer than what I expected. I delivered this in 15 minutes in Tokyo, but here it was very difficult. Sorry.
なんか15分って言われてましたが、非常に長くなってしまいましたが、ごめんなさい。
Thank you.